I spent nearly 13 hours, 2 layovers, 3 flight delays and endless waiting, just to hold my husband's favorite bottle of whiskey in my hands. A handcrafted grain whiskey I had ordered from another state. I wanted to surprise him on his annual camping trip with his close-knit group of friends. I thought he'd be touched. I thought that, for once, I'd be the one to light up his eyes the way he used to look at me in the beginning. Cabin No. 4 was deep in the pine forest of Vermont, where cell signals faded like morning fog and the night air was cold enough to turn my breath into smoke. I stepped quietly, my old sneakers crunching softly against the carpet of fallen leaves. Through the weathered wood of the door, I heard a familiar voice, clear as day, unfiltered. "If she disappears," Nathan's voice echoed from inside, "the insurance money would be enough to wipe out all that high-interest debt." I froze, my hand tightening around the bottle's handle until it went numb. "You're seriously considering it?" someone sneered. "Then you'd be free to date the sister-in-law, huh?" "You know," Nathan replied, his tone light as if discussing the weather. "Mia's always been more fun, not the type to obsess over what's right or wrong." That was when I noticed my hand was trembling, not from the cold, from disbelief. "Mia, my younger sister." I set the bottle down on the porch, so gently it made no sound, and backed away step by step, as if any noise might shatter everything. I met Nathan at a startup seminar in Chicago, back when I was working as a media assistant at a marketing firm. He was a guest speaker, confident, sharp, and persuasive enough to sell sand in the desert. I was 28, he was 34. My parents warned me, my friends raised eyebrows. I didn't care. Nathan made me feel chosen. We got married after 11 months of dating, no prenup. I didn't want him to think I doubted him. Something I now regret more than anything. I paid off his MBA loan for our first anniversary. When he said he wanted to launch a tech company, I invested 70% of my savings. He didn't ask. I volunteered. That's what love is, right? I used to believe that if I just tried hard enough, he'd see that I was the one who never left his side, even when he kept failing, even when he missed my birthday to meet with investors. I believed him when he said, "Madison, this is just the beginning. Once the company takes off, you'll never have to worry again." Now, I wasn't sure I'd live long enough to see that company succeed. They were still laughing inside. Nathan was retelling the story of how I nearly broke my arm on a hiking trip last month. Then came the sentence that sent a chill down my spine. "She's clumsy. One day she'll just fall. No one even has to do anything." I turned and walked away, my heart pounding so loud it drowned out everything else. I couldn't understand how someone who once kissed me every morning could now talk about my disappearance like a financial strategy. Every excuse I'd ever made for his absence fell away like dry leaves. I hurried to the rental car, threw my suitcase in the back seat without caring that it slammed into the door. Before getting in, I took off my wedding ring. The diamond he once said looked like a star on your hand was now just a finely cut lie. I pulled out my phone and searched for the nearest flight. Anywhere but here. My fingers trembled as I typed the destination, Santa Marta, Colombia. The earliest one left at 6 a.m. the next morning. I used to believe Nathan was the only one who truly saw me. Now I just needed to vanish from his life before he could help me vanish himself. I sat huddled in a corner seat at Burlington Airport, the neon lights reflecting off the foggy window, casting the face of a woman I barely recognized. Exhausted, hollow, awake. For the first time in years, I wasn't daydreaming anymore. Everything was suddenly, terrifyingly, clear. For 4 years I made myself Nathan's lifeline. When he said prenups were for people who didn't trust love, I agreed without hesitation. My father, a seasoned financial attorney, sighed during that dinner conversation and said, "Madison, if you don't set boundaries, don't blame others for crossing them." I ignored him. I thought love didn't need contracts. Then came the $92,000 0-cent student loan, Nathan said. "The interest feels like a noose," and I quietly paid it off with one click. No demand, no thank you. When his first startup collapsed, I used 3 years of savings from my media job to resurrect his pitch for a remote healthcare app, a slideshow that barely filled 10 slides. I even hired a UX designer and legal counsel to make it legitimate. In return, a vague, indirect co-founder mention on the site that eventually vanished without a trace. I wasn't angry, I felt foolish. I remembered that night in June when I brought Nathan to a family gathering. While I was chatting with Aunt Clara, I glanced over and saw him whispering to Mia, making her blush. When I asked, he said he was complimenting her dress. It reminded him of my college style. I brushed it off. I always did. Mia once texted me a few months after our wedding. "Hey, I'm not sure, but Nathan keeps asking weird questions about our family's finances. It's uncomfortable." I replied, "He's just trying to get to know us better. Don't worry, Nathan's a good guy." I defended him, even when something inside me started to feel off. But I didn't dare explore it. Because if I did, I'd have to admit I'd built my entire future on someone who didn't deserve it. And I wasn't ready for that truth until I stood outside that cabin hearing him speak like it was all just part of a well-planned strategy. I used to believe everything I did was just for now. That one day he'd succeed and I'd be proud to call myself the quiet partner behind the spotlight. But the truth is, I was just a walking credit card. Every investment, every sacrifice, every dream I shelved was only fueling a fantasy that was never mine to begin with. The flight to Santa Marta was packed, but my mind felt empty. I stared out the window as the city lights blurred beneath us, like memories swept away by the wind. I didn't know where I'd go or how I'd live, but at least I wasn't chained to an illusion anymore. I thought about the apartment we shared, the one under my name, paid for with the income from a campaign I built single-handedly. I remembered all the times he said, "Money's just a tool," and gently steered every expense my way. I used to think that was sharing. Now I see it was manipulation. I remembered how Nathan once said, while we watched a documentary on major scams in the US, "To survive in this world, sometimes you've got to think one step ahead." I laughed then, thinking he was joking. Now I know he meant every word. The plane touched down with a soft jolt. I exhaled for the first time in hours, like surfacing after a long, endless dive. I unlocked my phone, changed my display name on email, and canceled the next 4 weeks of meetings. Things were slipping from my hands, but this time, it was me letting go, not someone taking them. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I knew what I was leaving behind. A marriage built on deception and a man who made me believe sacrifice was my duty, when in truth, it was a trap dressed up in kisses and sweet words. I looked down at my hand, where my wedding ring used to be, now just a faint pale band of skin, and walked toward the airport's automatic doors. It was time to start over. But this time, no one would be walking beside me to lead me astray. The next morning I arrived in Oaxaca, Mexico, a city I had visited 4 years ago on a work trip while I was still with the media agency. I remembered the cobblestone streets glowing in the early sun, the mustard yellow and sky blue houses, and the tiny cafe called Flor de Luna with red papel picado strung across the ceiling, as if the breeze itself was too gentle to disturb them. No one knew I was here, no friends, no family, no Nathan. I rented a small room in a guest house run by an older woman named Teresa. She was about 60, her silver hair tied neatly at the nape of her neck, and her smile was gentle, as if life had shown her too much sorrow for her to ever need to ask questions. When I handed her my passport, she glanced at it and asked in soft English, "Madison Monroe? Pretty name." I hesitated, then nodded. Madison Monroe, my mother's maiden name. An old name, but for me now, it felt like a new skin. The room was simple, a wooden bed, a ceiling fan that creaked when the wind blew, a small window looking out over the backyard where bright bougainvillea bloomed, and a few hammocks hung between trees. Not luxurious, but peaceful. That afternoon I walked to a hair salon near the main square. When the stylist asked how much I wanted to cut off, I said just one thing. All of it. I want to let it go. My long hair, once praised by Nathan as a timeless kind of beauty, fell in layers to the floor. When the mirror showed me the new version of myself, I flinched slightly. My hair now brushed my chin in soft waves. My face looked younger, but my eyes, not innocent anymore. That evening, I opened my suitcase and unpacked the expensive clothes I had once folded so carefully. French silk blouses, Italian office dresses, heels from an upscale boutique in New York. I folded them again neatly into a large bag. The next morning I brought it to the nearby church with a note. For someone who needs them. I don't. Instead, I bought a few cotton dresses, hand-woven sandals, and a cheap scarf warm enough for chilly nights. For the first time in years, I wore what made me feel comfortable, not what made someone else proud. A week passed like that. No meetings, no phone calls, no marketing strategies clouding my mind. Just strong black coffee on the guest house balcony in the mornings, wandering the local markets in the afternoons, and falling asleep to the sound of rain tapping on tin roofs at night. My mind began to quiet. The wounds were still there, but they stopped bleeding. They began to scab over. One Friday morning, walking along a small road leading up to Monte Alban, I passed a handicraft shop. In the corner was a small art nook, tracing paper, watercolors, charcoal pencils. My fingers itched. How long had it been since I last held a pencil? I couldn't remember. In college I had a scholarship for art before switching to communications. Drawing used to be how I breathed. But after marrying Nathan, I stored my brushes away because art doesn't pay the bills, he'd said. I asked the shopkeeper if she sold individual sheets of paper. She smiled and handed me a small sketch pad and a few pencils. I sat at a wooden table near the window and began sketching the first image that came to mind. A woman standing with her back turned, cliffs behind her, the sea stretched out ahead. No name, no face, no voice, just freedom. From that day on, I drew every day. Strangers' faces, curtains dancing in the wind, a crooked cactus growing on a tiled roof. Each sketch felt like a breath released, like old memories being peeled away to make space for something new. One afternoon, Teresa brought me a cup of hot chocolate. She sat beside me, looked at the sketch I was finishing, and said gently, "Some people come here to forget. But you're not forgetting. You're remembering yourself." I froze. She was right. I hadn't come here to hide. I had come to return. Not return to someone, but to myself. The woman who once dared to dream, who dared to draw, who once believed in her own worth before handing it to someone who never deserved it. And this time, I wouldn't let anyone take it away again. On a morning softened by sunlight, I carried a few sketches to the same craft shop I had visited the week before. The owner, her name was Alma, smiled warmly and pointed to the back of the shop. "He's over there if you really want to learn to paint seriously." I turned and saw an older man with long silver hair tied loosely at the back, sitting on a wooden stool, carefully adding color to a half-finished oil painting. The walls behind him were filled with paintings. Mountains, old streets, portraits, vivid, real, and so full of emotion they looked ready to leap from their frames. Alma called out, "Miguel!" He looked up, deep brown eyes sharp and bright. As I approached, he motioned for me to sit and asked simply, "Have you painted before?" I nodded. "A long time ago. I'm just starting again." Miguel didn't ask anything else. He handed me a sheet of paper and a box of charcoal pencils. "Draw whatever you want." I drew my bare feet on rough stone ground. A simple image, but to me, it held all my solitude and resilience. Miguel studied the drawing for a long time, then said, "Your lines have depth. You're drawing with your heart, not just your eyes." Good. From then on, I came to the shop every afternoon. Miguel taught me how to blend colors, how to pace emotion, how not to overcorrect and erase the soul of the work. We didn't speak much, just painted, listened to classical music from an old radio, and exchanged the occasional quiet thought. That silence healed more than any therapy session I'd ever attended. At night, I returned to the guest house late. Teresa always left me a bowl of hot soup or wrapped tamales. She never asked why I was here or pried into my past, but sometimes she'd leave little notes under my lemonade glass. New beginnings often come from places no one expects. Or, what breaks can become something more beautiful. Slowly I grew used to life in Oaxaca. I made friends at the market, an old fruit vendor who gave me mango slices to try, a street kid who taught me a few Spanish words each day. I no longer woke up from nightmares. The panic attacks faded. And the strangest thing? I stopped thinking of Nathan whenever I saw a man in a white shirt. One day, Miguel placed one of my paintings on display in the shop, right next to his own. "Why that one?" I asked, looking at the image of a woman in a straw hat, her back to the viewer but her hand holding a brush facing forward. Firm, decisive. Miguel shrugged. "Because it has weight. The person who painted it isn't running anymore, she's walking forward." I stood still for a long time. It was the first time I realized I wasn't Nathan's wife or the supportive partner or the understanding woman anymore. I didn't have to play a role. I was Madison, and I was rewriting myself. That evening, Teresa brought a letter to my room. Neat handwriting, unfamiliar. It was from a local artist named Clara who ran a small gallery near Santo Domingo Church. She had seen my art at the craft shop and wanted to invite me to join a group exhibit with other women artists next month. I read it over and over in disbelief. Me, the woman who gave up art for fear of being labeled a dreamer, was now being asked to showcase my work. I didn't cry. I just sat there, gripping the letter, my heart pounding like I was stepping into the light after years of walking in the dark. That night I went to Flor de Luna, the cafe I had once visited years ago. I sat alone, ordered an iced latte, pulled out my sketchbook and began to draw. Not for anyone, not for display, just because I wanted to. A woman at the next table glanced over and smiled. "Are you an artist?" I looked up, met her eyes, and for the first time, I answered without hesitation. "Yes, I am." One chilly morning, while dipping my brush into color to paint a street scene for the upcoming exhibit, my phone rang. It was an international number. I recognized it instantly. It was Carson Wells, the private investigator I had quietly hired the day I arrived in Oaxaca. "Miss Madison," he said slowly, his voice low and steady, like stone striking stone. "I found what you needed, and I'm afraid it's more than you expected." I gripped the brush tighter. "Tell me." "Your husband, Nathan Monroe, took out a life insurance policy in your name, worth up to $4,500,000 0 cents, just 2 months after the wedding. The concerning part is that your signature on the policy is forged. What's worse, the paperwork was processed through a small brokerage in Florida that's previously been accused of document tampering in similar cases." I didn't respond right away. My head was spinning. I remembered that day. Nathan handing me a stack of vague financial documents, saying they were company paperwork. I signed without reading. Were those the signatures? "What else?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "You mentioned a joint bank account, right?" Carson continued. I traced the transaction history. There were at least 12 transfers Nathan made from that joint account into a personal account in Panama. That account currently holds over $800,000, 0 cents. All sourced from funds under your name. I dropped my brush, my hands started to shake. All these years I believed I was investing in our future. In truth, I had been funding betrayal. "I also found something regarding Nathan and Mia," Carson said, his tone slowing as if choosing his words carefully. "There's no definitive proof of a romantic relationship, but I have recordings of 2 recent calls. In them, Nathan says, 'Mia is a lot easier to sway than Madison, and she'll soon realize who's actually trustworthy in this family.'" I swallowed hard. Mia hadn't contacted me for 2 months. Not a message, not a call. At first, I thought she was upset because I disappeared without a word. But now, I wasn't so sure. Finally, Carson said after a pause, "You should prepare yourself. Nathan has been trying to reach out to your close friend, Kelly, and telling her you're mentally unstable, that you can't distinguish reality from imagination. His motive is clear. Discredit you with the people closest to you." I leaned back in my chair. Outside, the wind whispered through the roof tiles, like long buried secrets stirring in the earth. "I'll send the full report via encrypted email. Whatever you need to do next, I'm here to help," Carson finished. I thanked him and hung up, then sat in silence for hours, staring at the unfinished painting in front of me. The mossy green strokes I'd just added now looked out of place on the canvas. The painting of a peaceful town now carried the weight of deceit and cold-blooded calculation. I powered on my laptop and opened Carson's email. The attachments began appearing one by one. The life insurance policy with the forged signature. Bank statements showing transfers from the joint account to Panama. Screenshots of Nathan's messages to Mia. Audio recordings of the call with Kelly. A draft email Nathan had once written, asking a lawyer about the possibility of claiming control of assets if a spouse goes missing under unclear circumstances. I couldn't cry anymore. Every emotion felt choked inside my chest. Something in me, Something that once was soft, once believed, had died. I picked up a piece of paper and wrote a single line. I married a man who planned to erase me through finance. That night, I didn't eat. I made a cup of ginger tea and sat on the balcony with Teresa. She didn't say anything, just sat beside me, her hand gently resting on mine. For the first time, I told her everything, from the very beginning to the bitter end. When I finished, Teresa looked at me and nodded. "You're still alive, Madison. And you're smarter than he ever thought. Use that truth to rebuild your life, not for revenge, but to reclaim your justice." I didn't sleep that night. I planned, clearly, in detail, step by step. I couldn't let him keep living peacefully, spending my money, using my name, building a facade. 2 weeks after receiving Carson's report, I was in Miguel's studio when my phone vibrated, this time with an unfamiliar number from Seattle. I almost ignored it, but instinct made me pick up. On the other end was a woman's voice, shaky and choked with emotion. "Madison, it's me, Megan." I froze. Megan, Nathan's younger sister. The one who once called me the best sister ever, who stood by me at our wedding while his mother barely disguised her disdain. I hadn't heard from Megan since I disappeared. I assumed she believed Nathan's lies. "I knew you were alive," Megan whispered. "I asked everyone. I got this number from Kelly." My heart pounded. "What's going on?" "You need to know," she said, then broke down. "Nathan's being threatened because of gambling debt." I gripped the armrest. "How much?" "About $320,000, 0 cents. He's been hiding it for a year. Borrowed from dangerous people. Really dangerous. Last week they came to the house, wrecked the garage and left a message. 3 days to pay, or they'll make an example out of him," I finished softly, remembering Carson's words. Megan was silent, then began to cry. "Madison, I know he's done awful things, and you owe him nothing, but if they don't get the money, they'll come after me. I don't know what to do." I sat frozen. Megan had dreamed of opening a dance studio, saving for 3 years to buy a small condo in the suburbs. That condo had been secretly used by Nathan as collateral without her knowing. "Does he know you called me?" I asked, my tone sharp. "No, I didn't dare tell him. I just had no one else." I took a deep breath. I didn't call Carson right away. I didn't rush back either. Instead, I wrote a short note to Teresa and stepped out of the guest house to catch the overnight bus to Mexico City. From there, I flew to San Diego, using the passport under Madison Monroe, with every document quietly prepared over the past few weeks. On the flight, I didn't think of Nathan. I thought of Megan, the girl who once squeezed my hand at the wedding and whispered, "If he ever hurts you, I'll kick him in the shin." Now, she was the next one caught in his path. Once I landed in the US, I called Carson. "I need you to handle that debt. Quietly, no trace, no link to me, but under one condition." "What do you need?" Carson asked, understanding in his tone. "I want a full list of everyone watching Nathan, and I want you to go over every single asset, share, and recent transaction he's touched. I need to plan to end this." 3 days later, Carson sent the report. The lenders, a shadow group tied to underground gambling in Vegas, had passed charges related to vandalism and extortion. They didn't know I existed, and I intended to keep it that way. I wired the money through a third-party channel and settled the debt in a single payment. The group received it and left just one message in Megan's mailbox. "Paid. Don't make us come back." Carson confirmed they'd backed off. Megan called again, her voice trembling with relief. "What? What did you do?" "You don't need the details," I said. "Just know you're safe, and now, leave the city, sell the condo if you have to. Don't let Nathan know you called me." "What are you going to do?" Megan asked. I looked out the window of my temporary apartment, where the city lights shimmered in the late-night dark. "I'm going to end this. Not with noise, but with truth. And evidence no one can deny." After that call, I opened my laptop. The files Carson had sent were still there, the forged signatures, the bank transfers, the insurance policy. I started organizing everything, not for revenge, but for closure. When I hit send on that first email to the insurance company, with a copy of the forged policy attached, I knew Nathan's game was over. I flew back to Seattle on a red-eye flight, quietly, my short hair now chestnut brown instead of the golden blonde Nathan once claimed was his type. I wore glasses, a long coat, and kept my face neutral. Just another traveler heading home. No one noticed. That's exactly what I wanted. 3 days earlier, I had sent a full copy of the evidence to my personal attorney, Linda Graves, a sharp woman known for handling high-profile divorces in California. Linda called it a legal gold mine that could bring a man to his knees without a courtroom. I didn't want Nathan in jail, not yet. I wanted him to sign the divorce papers. I wanted to sever every legal tie and keep my hands clean while the law took its course. The next afternoon, I stood outside what used to be our home, a 2-story house with a white fence and a garden where I once planted lavender with my bare hands. Now, it looked cold and lifeless. The windows were all shuttered. Financial flyers littered the stone walkway, blowing in the wind. I didn't use a key. I rang the bell. It echoed flatly, then silence. After a moment, the door opened. Nathan stood there, hair unkempt, stubble rough, wearing a hoodie I'd never seen before. He froze, eyes wide. "Madison, oh my God, you're alive." I looked him straight in the eye. "Thought I vanished?" He took a step back. I searched everywhere for you. Police, press. Everyone said you were missing." I walked in without waiting for an invitation. "Yeah, missing, like the money in our joint account?" He closed the door, breathing hard. "I can explain." I opened my bag and placed a thick folder on the dining table. The same table where he once said we'd raise our future kids. "Here's everything, the fake insurance, the forged signature, the Panama account, the messages to my sister, and the plan to use an accident to cash in." Nathan's face drained of color, then flushed red. "You've been spying on me?" "No," I said calmly. "I survived you." He collapsed into a chair. "Madison, please, I was drowning in debt. I was cornered. I never meant—" "To what?" I cut in, voice like ice. "Never meant to push me off a cliff? Never meant for an accident to happen? Never meant to tell the police I was mentally unstable to make it all sound plausible?" He said nothing. His hands trembled in his lap. I pulled out another set of papers, divorce documents, already filled in, only the signature missing. "You have 2 choices. 1, sign this, leave the state as agreed, and keep what little dignity you've got left. 2, I send this entire file to the FBI, the insurance company, and the IRS. You can't." "I can, and I'm ready." I tilted my head slightly, expressionless. "Did you forget who I am? I ran a nationwide media campaign. You think I don't know how to control a narrative?" Nathan took the pen. His hand shook so much the signature came out jagged. When he set the pen down, he looked up. "Is this revenge?" I shook my head. "No. This is freedom. Justice will find you." There was a knock at the door. I opened it. Megan stood there, her gaze steady, her face thinner than I remembered. She stepped inside without looking at her brother. Nathan stammered. "Megan, you're here to talk to her, to explain for me?" "No," she said, eyes shining. "I'm here to tell you that I'm done being your lifeline." He went pale. Megan turned to me and gently took my hand. "Are we done?" I nodded. "We're done." We walked out of that house together. I didn't look back. The iron gate clicked shut behind us, barely a sound, but to me, it was the echo of a door closing forever. The Seattle wind cut across my face, sharp and cold, but my heart felt lighter than it ever had. 3 months after that final confrontation with Nathan, I stood in the middle of my small art studio in Oaxaca, the place I once considered a temporary escape, now truly my home. My first solo exhibition, Fractures That Don't Break, opened on an early autumn evening while the sun was still glowing and the streets buzzed with footsteps. 12 paintings lined the whitewashed walls, each one a chapter of the journey. From The Girl on the Cliff, haunting and raw, to The Dawn No One Witnessed, and finally The Woman with the Brush, a self-portrait I painted the morning after signing the divorce. Locals came, a few curious travelers wandered in. Miguel stood quietly in the corner with a glass of wine, eyes following me as I moved through the room. Teresa, in a simple purple dress, beamed as she introduced me as the American artist who found herself through art. I used to imagine the day I got back at Nathan would feel thunderous. But it didn't. When I heard he had fled the US taking part of the leftover Panama funds to dodge investigations by the insurance company and the IRS, I simply lifted my tea, exhaled, and turned the page in my sketchbook. Carson sent me copies of the documents the FBI was reviewing, along with a short message. No further action needed. He buried himself. I didn't need to witness it. I need an apology. Because for the first time, I didn't care about anyone else's script. Megan, after years in her brother's shadow, moved to Boulder, Colorado and opened an indie bookstore called The Turning Page. On opening day, she sent me a handwritten letter. "You are the next chapter I needed. Thank you for rescuing me from a story I didn't belong in." I pinned that note above my desk, right next to a photo of the two of us at the exhibit. And Mia, after everything, she arrived in Oaxaca in mid-August. I wasn't expecting her, hadn't prepared, but when I saw her at the doorway, thinner, eyes rimmed with red, I simply opened my arms. "I'm sorry," Mia said, burying her face into my shoulder. "I believed the wrong person. I stayed silent when I should have spoken up." I said nothing. I didn't need to. Some pain only needs a hug to begin healing. She stayed for a week. We went to the market, cooked meals together, and she even tried sketching her first painting. A small, lonely boat adrift on the sea. When she left, I gave her a blank notebook. On the first page, I wrote, "No pain lasts forever, so long as you choose to keep writing." I chose to keep writing, not in anger, not with bitterness, but with color, with brush strokes, and with a life lived true to myself. One soft winter afternoon, as I brewed peppermint tea, Teresa walked in holding a local Spanish newspaper. On the front page was a photo of me painting by the sea. The headline read, "The Woman Who Turned Pain into Art." I smiled, not out of pride, but because I knew this version of me didn't need validation anymore. I once was the perfect wife in the eyes of a man who never truly saw me. Now I am simply me, no longer performing, no longer proving anything to anyone. And if someone asked what the greatest revenge of my life was, I'd simply answer, I lived, fully, and no one can take that from me now. My story is no longer about Nathan or loss or betrayal. It's about learning to let go of the expectations others placed on me and coming home to my truest self. A Madison who is strong, free, and full of fire. I no longer measure my worth by sacrifice or blind forgiveness. I choose to live by heart and by wisdom, and in the quiet of peace I found the most valuable thing of all, myself. What do you think of Madison's journey? Is choosing to live true to yourself the most powerful way to heal? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more moving family stories.